Welcome back to Swine TV. We conclude the 2023 Swine Hall of Fame induction interviews honoring the late Bill Prestage. Today, joining us is John Prestage, Bill's son. Welcome, John.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
We really appreciate you joining us today to represent your father, the great Bill Prestage, in the Swine Hall of Fame. Congratulations to your family on all of your success. Do you have a little story to summarize Bill's journey?
Yeah, Bill, my dad, Bill, was born in Michigan. He was born in Kalamazoo, Michigan, in 1935, and all the rest of our family was born in Battle Creek. So we were all Yankees originally, but as you can tell by my accent, we moved south when I was like 2 years old. And so, Dad is a great example of a snowbird from the upper Midwest that moved down south early in his career and his entire career, and was very successful. Came from humble beginnings and no support behind him other than his hard work ethic, and had a little luck involved, but certainly went from being a guy that was not even in the agriculture business to an icon, and building the legacy that is our company, Prestage Farms, that will turn 40 years old this year.
What prompted the move, from Michigan?
Well, Dad's father was in the beer distribution business, and they're of course pretty popular up in the upper Midwest. Pfeiffer beer was their brand name that they pushed to local taverns and whatnot. And when Dad was early on in life, he really didn't want to go into that business. There's obviously some problems in that business with alcoholism and whatnot, and he decided he would rather do something else, even though he was offered the opportunity to stay in the family business. But he decided to go elsewhere. He always liked agriculture. He didn't really grow up on a full-blown farm, but certainly was familiar with farms and did that in school and everything. And so he went and looked around trying to find a job, and landed a job with Central Soy in Fort Wayne, Indiana, in the early 60s, and actually in the late 50s. And whenever he was hired and given the opportunity to represent them and sell feed, Master Mix Feeds it was called, they said all the action's in the Southeast. You got to go down where the chickens are going in, the turkeys and the hogs. And so, we love for you to work for us, but you can't do it here. You got to go south. And so, it was a tough day for my mother. And of course, I'm the youngest of three sons, and my two older brothers and me, we all packed up the car and the family dog, and away we went down south. And, we went to Spartanburg, South Carolina first, was his first sales territory. And then only in a couple of years, they moved him over to Fayetteville, North Carolina, which is close to where we are now. And really, that was where his big break was offered, when one of his best customers, Mr. Otis Carroll, really liked Dad. Dad could charm the horns off a goat, and he really was very, very approachable and everything, and he trusted him. And Mr. Carroll was older than Dad. He was probably 25 years older. And he had some grandsons and daughters that were about the age of me and my brothers, but his didn't have a son in the business, and just really thought it'd be a great opportunity to become partners. So Dad quit his job with Central Soy, making in those days pretty good money, to gamble and become a 50-50 partner in a new business, but one he thought he would like. And that was really where it all began. And that was in the mid to late 60s. And so we, at the time, we were living in Fayetteville, North Carolina, where the Army base is at. And we had to move closer to where the production facilities were going to be, and which was in Warsaw at that time. And we decided to live in Clinton, where we still live today. And that was really what got it all started. And they just started putting in hogs and turkeys at the same time. We really put in turkeys kind of first, and hogs came a little later, even though we're much larger in hogs today. But we really kind of started as a turkey company. And but that was really what started him in the livestock production business. And then, a few years later, several years later, actually, Mr. Carroll passed away, And, it wasn't working out between us and the grandchildren, which were their owners. And so we went into a buy sell, and they bought us out, and then we had to start over. That was really what started Prestage Farms.
Now you're a full protein company, Kalamazoo, Michigan, also home of Derek Jeter. So tell me about you, John.
Well, like I said, I'm the youngest of Bill's three sons. And a matter of fact, I just turned 65 here a couple of weeks ago, or about a week ago. And when I was very young, when Dad was first going out looking at turkeys, he did it all, obviously in the early days with Mr. Carroll. And I was fortunate enough to be able to go with him. He worked all the time. And I went with him a lot, and I really enjoyed learning about turkeys and going out with them and diagnosing problems, and especially talking with the growers. That was very, very entertaining to me, and very rewarding. And so really, I kind of knew early on, I was lucky. I was very, very intrigued by the industry and decided that I think I'd like to do this myself. So, did various things in the summer and whatnot as I grew up. And then whenever I was able to go to college, I knew I wanted to learn this business. So I went to NC State in Raleigh, and I got a BS degree in business animal science. And because at that time, of course, we were in hogs and turkeys both, even though I kind of started as a turkey guy. And so that was, and I was fortunate enough when I got out, I went to work for Carroll's Foods at the time still, being in the field with turkeys every day. And then shortly after I was there, or started working there, was when Mr. Carroll passed away. And then that prompted, of course, the sellout. And so when we did sell out in early '83, we had a 1-year non-compete. And so we had to kind of figure out what we're going to do, and decided to do the same thing we were doing there. And so we did. And we were fortunate enough to buy an existing turkey grow-out operation owned by Swift over in Harrell's, a little small town in eastern North Carolina. And at least that gave us the startup we needed, with existing employees. I think we had about 25 employees and about 25 growers. And but it was, in operation, in cash flow. And that was the break we needed to get started. We knew we were going to build a nicer feed mill and a better office, and we knew we were going to expand, and we certainly did. But that was the start we needed. That was the lucky break we needed to get going. And so that's what we did. And then we started building our headquarters, which we're still in today, and opened the office and the feed mill in '84, right where I'm sitting today. And have been here ever since.
Happy belated birthday as well, John.
Well, thank you.
And so one of the reasons why we launched the Hall of Fame is just to celebrate people in the industry, tell stories, things like that. What would this recognition mean to Bill? And then what does it mean to the family?
Well, certainly it means a lot. Dad was very proud of being a food producer, as we all are, our whole family. All of us, my two older brothers and myself, are active in the business, of course. And my mother, she's elderly now, but certainly she's been a very instrumental part. She did it all in the accounting end, from day one as well. She was a very smart woman that understood the business aspect, and certainly his lifelong partner. But it means a lot, because we've always been proud to raise food. That's about as good as it gets as far as I'm concerned. And he was a very likable fellow, obviously, and got along with everybody and had a lot of great relationships. But I think that he was just so proud to be a food producer. In other words, I probably shouldn't compare it to this, but where we are in North Carolina is tobacco country. And when we first came, I think one of the reasons contract production became so popular, tobacco was kind of dying out, as far as, literally a small farm, independent farmer that could literally make a living for his family on like 10 acres of tobacco. And but as that started consolidating and going away, a lot of these people, they didn't have enough land to be able to, do row crop. They had to have something else. And I really think that's what birthed the contract growing model for the Eastern U.S., North Carolina in particular. It was available in hogs, turkeys, and chickens. And now it's just flourished. There's just thousands of contract growers in our state now that families can, basically live off the farm, and most of them might have part-time or full-time work as well. And I think he's, I'm just as proud as he is, and I know he was very proud of that relationship of those production partners really being an extension of our family and especially our business.
Do you know if from the beginning he had the vision to create something this incredible, or did it kind of happen in stages through hard work?
I definitely think it happened in stages certainly through hard work. When we came here and we were young kids, he worked all the time. I mean, 6 days a week was minimum, and Sunday was not out of the question. And you definitely got to have a little luck in business, but you're never going to have good luck without good hard work behind it. And he was always willing to try something new, and he really enjoyed doing things like time studies on a sow farm, at a turkey farm, about how long did it take to do a certain task. And he was always very proud of that. He very much liked the hands-on approach to production agriculture. And so he very much proud of himself in knowing the ins and outs of what it took to grow the hogs and the turkeys. But he was also very willing to take chances and especially make change. And North Carolina's had a lot of entrepreneurs came along that in housing and environmental things, especially, that he welcomed and was always willing to try. And it's still that way today, of course. And I really think the fact that North Carolina production always knew we had a disadvantage in feed costs because we're such a grain deficit state. We knew we had to do something better in facility cost and production labor to get the job done. And I think that was some of the things that we did here in the eastern part of the state in poultry and hogs that really kind of got the ball rolling on being good competitive producers.
So when you think about Bill Prestage, is there a standout memory or achievement?
Yes, I think so. I really think whenever really we had two major breaks that enabled us to opportunities, I should say, that enabled us to grow to the size we are today. To start with, just in the North Carolina boundaries, and then later that led to the other states we're in now. We now operate in 6 states. And I think the first was, again, we were in turkeys, a little bigger to start with than we were hogs. And that was probably because he had a good relationship with another family business in Virginia, the Stricklers that owned Rockingham County, Virginia, and the Shenandoah Valley. And, we liked them. We worked well together with them. We did a lot of business in the turkey world with them. And then we had this, thought together that, we did a good job growing turkeys, and they owned the plants. We didn't have a turkey plant at the time. So we decided, let's build one together, and we'll supply all the turkeys and they'll run the plant and, sell the meat. And so we did. And that was when we built the St. Paul's plant, which opened in 1990. So we were gearing up to get ready for the turkey production to fill that plant in the mid to late 80s. That was his first big break to really start putting us on a level of volume where we were going to be a significant player. And so we did, and put all the turkeys in for that plant. And then only about 2 years later, after that plant opened, actually while our plant was being opened, the Tar Heel plant was being thought up and going to be built. And it was. Tar Heel opened, I believe, is in the summer or fall of '92. And before it opened, we actually had the first right of refusal on the old John Burrell plant in Wilson. And Dad wasn't that good of a friend, or he wasn't as close to Joe Luter III at the time before all this occurred. But he met the guy, and obviously, he knew about us and everything. And obviously, you had the Murphy family down here, and still the old Carroll's operation was here, and that was going to be the foundation of hog supply for that plant. And so I think the next big break, and I was fortunate enough to kind of be there. We kind of knew that Wilson plant was not going to be viable, at least at slaughter. It ended up being further processed. But I was fortunate enough to take Dad down to the Tar Heel plant the day. It was actually up and running, but we were taking our hogs elsewhere at the time at that other old plant. And he went to meet with Joe Luter III. And I was driving, and it was in the summer, and it was a hot day. And I remember the car I was driving, Dad's car, the air conditioner wasn't working. And they were blaming me. They kept yelling at me, it's like, get that damn thing working. And I was like, well, it's not my fault, but let's just go into the shade tree and talk. It was a very hot July day. And it was very short and to the point. Dad talked to Joe and said, Joe, he said, all I'm here to tell you is that I know that plant's not competitive, and I'm sure I can be a great supplier to your company, but I'm not going to sell you my hogs any cheaper than you're buying from Carroll's or Murphy Farms. As long as we have the same deal, we're in. And Joe Litter said, well, I'm in too. Let's do it. And it was basically that short and sweet handshake deal. And we laughed about it and complained about the air conditioner a little bit more. And that was the day that our relationship was formed with Joe 3, and my dad and Joe 3 ended up being very close friends. They were true friends in business, even though they weren't partners, other than, the obligation of a supplier to the slaughterhouse, but they had a great relationship that endured, through the end of time. In fact, Dad spoke, he was on their board and spoke at many events. And when they had the unveiling of the statue honoring Joe 3 up in Virginia, Dad spoke on the behalf and really mainly spoke about relationships between, suppliers and vendors, and about how important it was. And that was very true. There's no question the Smithfield was the company that got in a lot of hog production as well as slaughter, and understood the importance of those two working together. And I think that was just very much, solidified with the relationship between Joe 3 and my dad. And that was really what set us on track to being a preferred supplier of them. And we still are today. I think we're still the largest supplier of live hogs to Smithfield, besides themselves, of course.
So along the way, was there like a key teaching moment?
Yeah, I mean, there's always a lot of key teaching moments with Dad's. His infatuation was always least cost production. If there's one thing he would just stress over and over, it was least cost production. And sometimes I'd argue saying, well, our revenue side is almost as important as that, I believe. And he would remind me, no, it never is. If you're not a competitive least cost producer, then you don't have a chance. And I think that was kind of born out of the fact that, Eastern North Carolina, again, had a very feed cost disadvantage, and it always has and always will, versus, the Corn Belt. And I think that's what always drove Dad. He was always infatuated with making sure we were doing all the little things right. And as you know, our business is a very low margin business, and, very small incremental cost savings or disadvantages have to be, worked on to be competitive. And I really think that us more, focusing on live production. We weren't in the plant and hog slaughter, especially, for many years. He was just very much in tune to all the very minute details it takes to be very good in growing a live hog and a live turkey. And that's just what he always concentrated on and instilled in a lot of us. I actually did all the nutrition work for both the hogs and the turkeys after we started over, because we didn't have a nutritionist. And he said, well, didn't you take nutrition in college? I said, yeah, 2 courses. He goes, well, congratulations, get good at it. So I did it all for 15 years and really, him saying, look, you don't, even though you don't know it now, if you work hard enough and always let your eyes tell you in the field what's happening, you'll be good at it. And that's how I approached it, and still kind of look at it that way today. And that's really kind of what I learned from him, that if you got good common sense, you can make the right decision long term by focusing on what's working.
What was the Bill Prestage key to longevity?
I think clearly his love of people, and him being a big believer that the team of workers at the company, you obviously can't do it alone. The Prestage family can't do it alone. He was just such a likable guy that he could be stern, he could be tough, he could be mean if he needed to, but he was also very fair and very generous. And I think that anybody that worked with him, especially on a personal basis or on a direct basis, just understood exactly where he was coming from. He was very, very honest. And I just think that's usually pretty easily communicated with a personality like he had, and people that are that are astute in business at all are going to realize that very, very quickly, and are going to realize this is the kind of guy I want to do business with. And you see a man that is as honest as he was, and as straightforward, and not beat around the bush, and get to the point, and be honest and fair about what we can do to make things better and solve problems. I think that goes a long way into forging a good business relationship with other people, whether they're your partner in business, or they work for you, or they're a vendor or a supplier. I think it's true with all those people. And that was definitely his strength. He was very much just a good old people person.
Where do we need the industry to be in 50 years?
Wow. Well, that's a great question. On one hand, I wish that, and I'll speak about pork, and we're now obviously about 70% pork versus turkey, and so that kind of floats our boat the most, whether we're sinking or going high on the tide on the profitability of that sector. And on the one hand, I think the U.S. is the best pork production in the world, but unfortunately, it seems like a lot of countries don't want to buy from us, import from us, just because they're jealous of us, in my opinion. And us relying on this export has got me a little concerned. I think that's kind of the dilemma we're in now, with a little bit of oversupply, thinking we're going to have all this Chinese pork that they're going to take forever. And we've seen pretty quickly how they've replenished us, replaced our pork with their own. And so I think, unfortunately, you're going to continue to see consolidation, definitely on the production side. I think the days of really small farms are over. We really thought, I'll give you an example. We built a lot of our sows in North Carolina back in the 80s and 90s. We really thought a small sow farm, a 624 sow farm, was a perfect farm, because a husband and wife team could take care of it with only one helping employee. And that was true, and that model worked. But the problem is, eventually, when you work 7 days a week, every week for a few years, you get burned out. And I think that's what necessitated the need for the small farms, where you can have labor that rotates on the weekends, and that's, so that model just didn't work that good for an independent guy. You had to have a team of people that you could rotate labor, and that's kind of what it takes. But so I think clearly you're going to see large farms dominate in the future, in both sow base as well as growth finish space. And certainly there's limits there you need to be careful of with mixing of sources of pigs. But it's a little. I really think with the vet clinic type producers like Pipestone and Carthage, that there's certainly plenty of room, and they're very good producers. That when they work together like they do, they're very good producers of pork in this country. But I think you are going to see more consolidation in the slaughter of the pigs and selling of the meat. And I just hope that it stays fair for everybody, where we can try to spread the thin margin there is in the total supply chain of putting pork on the table. I just hope we can keep some kept aside for the live producer, as well as the slaughterhouse, as well as the value added FP producer.
Is there something we don't know about Bill, or a story that nobody's heard?
Well, there's been a lot of stories, and I think one of my favorite memories, that Dad was very competitive, even though he never was a professional athlete or a college athlete or anything, but he was a pretty athletic guy. He actually did box when he was in high school, and he has some funny stories about that. But one of my favorite stories that I remember well was, there was a lot of family owned corporations down here now that some of them are corporate owned now, but some of them are still left. And the one in particular is House of Rayford. Marvin Johnson was a guy very much like my dad, and a little bit older. And Dad and Marvin used to like to, bet and talk about, he was always in chickens and turkeys. He never was in hogs. We were in hogs and turkeys. And Dad said, well, he said, Marvin, he said, we're going to beat you on profitability growing hogs this year. And this was back in I think it was in the late 90s. And he said, I'm going to bet you $5,000, and we're going to write it down that I'm going to beat you being competitive and growing hogs versus chickens in profitability for this certain period of time. And Mark goes, you're on. And so we went on, and we kind of forgot about it. And Dad said, he said, I'm going to go back and look at that. and it was very, very close. Actually, I'm not even sure if we lost a bet or not, but he said, we're going to have some fun with this. He said, Marvin, we got to meet together with all the guys in the business. It was the Murphy family. It was the Maxwells with Goldsboro Millen. It was us, the Johnsons with House of Rayford. And so he said, we're going to go to a local restaurant. And he said, I've lost a bet and I want to pay you off. And he goes, okay. So me and the controller, the chief financial officer of our company, went to the bank and got $5,000 in $1 bills, put it in a garbage bag. We kind of felt like we were doing something illegal with a bag full of money. And we left and went to the restaurant that night. And we had some entertainment coming there to make some funny, things. And it was just hilarious. We all had a good time. And then when it came payment time, Dad, he goes, well, it's time to pay up, Marvin. And he pulled out this bag of cash and literally just turned it upside down and dumped it on the floor. And it just looked like this huge amount of money, even though it was only $5,000. And there were our two guys that were the waiters taking care of us that night. Marvin looked at me and said, if you boys want a tip, I'd advise you to jump in there right now. And they did. And I think they got about half of it. But it was we all laughed. We thought that was great. And he ended up framing a little picture or a little letter we made of that bet and wrote down the date that we, executed and all that. And we still got it framed in our conference room today.
I bet there's lots of stories there, John.
Oh, there's a lot of stories. There was a lot of character between Wendell Murphy and Marvin Johnson and Louis Maxwell. It was really a lot of fun in the days when we were all family owned like we are still today, and the Johnsons still are, but unfortunately, some of the other family ones sold to the corporate America, and things are a little bit different. They're still good, but that we had some really good times as all competitors, and I think it's evidenced by the fact that years ago we all realized the importance of being competitive again in our disadvantage here in the East. And so we were the first, I believe we were the first combination of companies to come together and buy supplies together. We call it Ag Provision. It was over 25 years ago now. We would buy things like, vitamins for the feed, amino acids for the feed, and a lot of feed grade things, and then vaccines and, medications you put in the feed for the hogs and the turkeys. We'd always buy together. We would, commoditize, the pricing of high volume ingredients that we use to, make meat production. And, even though we were competitors, we worked together and we realized the importance that it would help us all. And that we still do that today. That was started by the old founders, my dad being one of them. And we're trying to maintain that same camaraderie and realization that working together can save us all money, even though we are competitors, and we still do that today.
Final word about your dad, Bill Prestage, John?
Well, he was a guy, one thing that really bothered, again, I've told you, he was a very, very good people person and a very good judge of character. If there was one thing, probably the thing he was the best at was being able to judge the talent of a person. They might have the personality to do sales. They might be a production guy. They might speak well in front of people. They might not. But he had an uncanny ability to know how to put the right guy in the right place to get the job done. And I think that was his greatest strength, that just knowing that. But what really bothered him as he got older, in the last probably 10 years, obviously his memory would start slipping a little bit. And it would really bother him when everybody that knows him in this part of the country, of course, and around the whole U.S. would see him, hey, Bill, how you doing? He could not remember their name. And that would really bother him because he, it's like the old saying, what's the most important thing you can say to a person, their name, right? And it really got under his skin. He would forget that. He was always asking me, who was that again? Who was that? And I would tell him, if I knew. But just the fact that he was such a people-oriented guy, always was and always will be. That's what I think, people would remember the most about him. And I think that is the thing that he would want the people to know the most about him, is that very thing.
Well, John, thanks for joining us and celebrating Bill and representing him into the Swine Hall of Fame.
Thank you very much. It's an honor. And like I say, my mother's still kind of struggling with his passing, and my brothers are as well. but we just been so fortunate, all three of us, to have worked with him, you know, for me, my entire career. And one of my other brothers, my oldest brother, was a horse vet for several years, but he joined us in the 90s. And it's just, and of course, we all have children, and all of us have at least two of our children active in the business, and hope that we can maintain what we started here and keep it family owned. And, you know, I think fortunately, they're all as proud of food production in the U.S. as we are, and hope that we can keep the Prestage name alive, even though you don't see our brands out there. You know, we're a very large private label producer, especially in turkey. And, but that's fine. It's still food, and we still love to produce it and feed America and the world. And I've just been fortunate enough to have done that all these years with Bill, my dad. And it's been a great career.
Memories last a lifetime, and we learned a lot today, John.
Absolutely. Very much so.